welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. This week, we're going to spend a little bit different look at some of the advanced technologies and autonomy that we often talk about here on the show. Our guest today is Chad Dittberner. Chad is a longtime veteran with Werner Enterprises. He has spent the last 7 years as the senior vice president of the one-way van and expedited business, which is a unit of Werner. Chad also spends a lot of time dealing with drivers and with the business end of trucking, and really spends a lot of time on some of the new technologies. Chad, welcome to Truck Tech.
Thank you, Ellen. Good to talk with you again.
Yeah, you know, we saw each other a couple of years ago. You were doing a presentation at the not the ACT Expo, but ACT Research event in Indiana. And, you know, even at the time, I think you were sort of talking about some of the areas that Werner really is a pretty curious company in the sense of being curious, that is, you know, around advanced technology. You know, your interest is keen, really. And I think I wrote about it a couple of years ago, but is this really a business philosophy, or is it a strategy, or maybe a little of both?
I would absolutely say both. I mean, as we move forward, as we grow as a company, we're a leader in the industry. You have to stay in front of all technologies that are out there. Not all of them are going to survive through the process, but if you don't stay in front, you're behind, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think, you know, you've been at this about 7 years now in this space, and I guess I'd have to ask you to take us back sort of to maybe what you would consider one of the early, if not the first thing that you sort of took a look at or said, hey, give us one of those. We'll give that a try.
Yeah, I mean, we can go back even further than that. I've been on the Innovation Council for multiple years, I think 10 or 12 years that it was created. And that goes clear back to trailer skirts and aerodynamics on trucks and trailers. So been working on this for quite a while, but more recently, yes, innovation in truck trailer has exploded. Different fuels, carbon emission reductions, autonomous truck. It's a full-time job outside of my full-time job.
Well, and there must be some stories that go with that, which maybe we can get into as we go on. You know, my experience, at least in terms of watching Werner, you know, natural gas was, of course, something, you know, with the new Cummins X15N is something I think you signed on to actually purchase, not just test. But you've also tested it as well, and you'd be among the earlier companies. I think they did just do their first delivery in a Kenworth T680 recently, but you've had these trucks for a while. Let's start there. What's been the experience of your drivers with a natural gas engine that maybe has a little more oomph than some that have been in the business?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a great experience. Started and as you know, we were one of the first to get a test truck, so we knew that there'd be some adjustments. It went into the shop multiple times just to get adjustments and really fine tune it. But post that first 3 or 4 months, it's been running very well for us. Driver likes the torque. The driver experience as a whole has been wonderful. There's really been overall a good experience with that technology coming right out of the gate. We were in some natural gas trucks back in 2011, 12, 13, and not such a great experience then, but with a duty-built engine from the ground up, this experience has been very good. We're just about a year into running that truck at this point.
Yeah, you know, Jose Sampera, who runs on highway now for Cummins, actually told me not long ago that he could see a 10% penetration for natural gas down the road because of the X15N. Do you think that kind of step change in natural gas is something that could happen? I mean, it's always been a 1 or 2% player.
Yeah. So the truck at this point has proven itself out. It's slightly more expensive. Your carbon footprint, tailpipe emissions are absolutely better on it. So the time will really tell on the adoption just based on the running cost per mile compared to a diesel cost per mile. But it's absolutely today you can buy those trucks and you can reduce carbon out of the tailpipe. And other emissions at this point. So I'm not going to predict what percentage it makes up over the coming years, but it's a technology that's there today, fueling stations across the country, and absolutely it improves the environment. So it is a solution that's available today, unlike many others that we're working towards, striving towards, but today this technology is out there and available with an infrastructure built out.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because so much of the infrastructure that you talk about is moving to renewable natural gas, which, of course, also, could put you down to sort of a negative net zero environmental impact. And, especially in California, I think 98% of the natural gas there is RNG at this point, maybe a little less than 70% nationally. Battery electric, I'm sure you've tested a number of different manufacturers' BEV product. Give me your sense on that right now. I mean, it's not really as much of a test issue now as it is a purchase issue, I imagine.
Yeah. Our life cycle in battery tech has really been started probably 5 years ago with ultimately 3 companies working on a true test and making modifications ongoing to the truck to understand best purpose of charging, best battery configurement, size, scope of battery needs. So that test was done. It was about a 3-year test. Post that, we decided without any customer commitment, we decided to put 10 trucks in place. The first 2 of those trucks we started a little over 9 months ago in California, specifically in the Fontana area. And we've been testing 2 of those trucks now coming up 9+ months, and had a good experience with those 2 trucks. The other 8 trucks are on the ground for us in California now, just recently. Those trucks we are going to put into service fairly soon. Part of that wait has been the infrastructure as we talk about the build out. So we've had a order in for 2.5+ years for infrastructure in the ground in Fontana at our terminal to put in 10 charging stations, and that is finally coming to light. We should be online by mid-June with those 10 charging stations. So there are public charging stations in the marketplace, but we just received the last 8, and we will start to operate those other 8 trucks. So a total of 10 here in the very near future.
Are those all from one manufacturer? And can you say who that you went with?
Yep. Those are all Freightliner e-Cascadias at this point.
Okay. And I can say this because it's now known, but we're going to talk about autonomy, but it's interesting to note that the e-Cascadia is now, there's a test demo for autonomous use as well in a day cab, something that, is, just recently announced. It's interesting, too, though, before we get to the autonomy thing, I want to, you mentioned something interesting because I've heard 2 different things. I've been to Fontana, and I've heard 2 different things. There's a lot of power out there because there's a lot of warehouses and, cold storage and things like that. So a lot of power in the ground. But I was also told very recently, and you just bore this out, is that it really is not easy to get your infrastructure in place for charging there. If you're waiting 2.5 years and you didn't need a substation or anything, right?
We did not need a substation. You're correct. But it was a combination not just of getting the power there, but the switching gear, the actual charging units, switching gears, which have been the biggest delay of all of it. But until you have your units in, they won't provide power to the location. So it's a combination of many different parts of that infrastructure to get us to this date. So not just the power company, but you can't schedule the power until you get the charging stations in.
Right. And it's a bit of a linear approach, I guess. I mean, like you say, you can't have the one until you get the other. And I remember that switching equipment was, in fact, one of the biggest hangups, if you will, around electrification. So kind of toe in the water on electrification, it sounds like. I mean, 10 trucks, I don't know how many you run. How many trucks do you run total out of the company?
Company, just under 8,000 trucks in total.
Okay. So you would agree with toe in the water, I think, on electrification at this point.
Yes.
And again, its use at this point is pretty much a regional kind of thing. I mean, you're talking 230 miles, give or take, on the eCascadia, the second generation truck. So that's a regional haul, maybe a little more than that. Was that how you characterize it?
Very, very regional. It is for the most part, return to base, and there's different conversations out there about making it an over the road truck, long distances. But let's talk about where it fits in and where reality kind of meets the road, if you will. Today, it's if you're going to deploy it, if you're going to utilize it, it is a return to base daily truck. People often forget about the driver piece of it and charging. So if you're looking to an over the road application, how does it affect the driver's hours, as they would have to stop every 230 to every 250 miles and take a break at that time? And can they take a break? Some charging locations they could walk away from their truck, and others they're active in staying with their truck because they're at a charging station that takes longer than diesel today, by far. So it's a return, in my mind, where EV fits in. I mean, we can summarize it down to this. EV fits in a very regional return to base type application if people are willing to pay the extra cost for it. Today, the cost is much more expensive for the truck unit than a diesel comparative. And it's going to take a combination of the carrier, the customer, and the EV truck in a regional application to really make it work.
Well, you do have obviously some incentive, especially in California, some incentives. I presume you went through HVIP and some of those things to offset some of that upfront cost. Has your modeling showed, though, that the presumably lower maintenance costs and ultimately, I guess, a little less for electricity, paying a little less for electricity than you would diesel, do those all pencil out for you over time, Chad?
Yeah, over time is yet to be understood, and that's part of what we do. We decided to put those 10 trucks in and understand the EV truck, understand what it looks like through the life cycle. Brand new equipment, brand new technology. What does the maintenance footprint look like? I know there's suggestions, but up until 2 years ago, nobody was really running that unit. So we have to understand the maintenance footprint of it. Fuel costs compared to EV charging costs, right now we're seeing to be very similar with diesel. Where is that savings? Yes, we took advantage of some of those funds, and that did bring down the cost of the unit, but it is still much more expensive. So time will play out. How long will that battery pack ultimately last before it needs replacement? What will electricity costs do in the coming years compared to fuel price? All of those things have to be taken into account, and many of them are uncharted territory at this point. So that's why we took the 10 trucks and really early understanding of the technology.
Sure. Well, the one thing you didn't mention, it's something, that I wrote about recently, and that's this whole question of residuals. I spoke with Rich Moore, and you probably know Rich from ChargePoint. And,
yes.
And he said, the big issue for electric trucks right now is first and second generation trucks. There's no way to determine what they're going to be worth when you're done with them. And unless you're planning to drive it into the ground or, drive it to scrap, you really can't set a residual. That seems to be another issue, isn't it?
Yeah. Any new technology is a concern on figuring residual, and you have to assume that truck is not going to be worth much more than scrap by the time you're done running it. So we probably will run these trucks longer than we typically run a Werner truck. Our normal average age is just over 2 years of our trucks running across the U.S. These EV trucks, we will run much longer than that to understand the life cycle.
Well, and at 2 years, you're at the lower end of turn cycles anyway, because isn't it usually 4 or 4 to 5 years?
Yeah. Industry average, I think, is into the 5 to 6. We like to keep a new truck fully under warranty, the newest technology for our professional drivers on the roadway in the trucks, safety devices on the trucks. So we found that mix to really make sense to keep the newest truck on the roadway for all of those reasons. Customer deliveries, they expect on-time deliveries and let us know if we don't. So all of that together, we believe the solution is keeping the newest truck on the roadway.
Yeah. And so the idea of just, either leasing it, I don't know what your purchase arrangement or leasing arrangement was, but getting a 2-year lease, they can't tell you at the end of 2 years right now what that truck is worth, what you can get for it. So you're just going to keep it on the road.
Yes.
Let's move over to autonomy, because I think that's really where the future is, perhaps, for long haul. And I just want to get your sense on how you're approaching it, what you are looking at, and who you're working with at this point in terms of, tests and things like that.
Yeah. So autonomy, I think, call it 6 years ago, we went out to Northern California and saw our first autonomous vehicle. That company's no longer in business, but I was what I'd call mildly impressed at that point on that first unit. And we've worked with 10 different companies in the past 6 years, just understanding the roadmap, understanding what really the end game is for all of them. They all have common themes, go about it just a little bit differently. We've seen a few companies leave the marketplace that we've worked with and understood their equipment. Today, publicly, we are doing test loads with Aurora and Kodiak Autonomous, both of those companies. We do have a couple more that we will start test later this year, not yet announced, but we need to stay with multiple companies and who's going to have the best technology, who is ultimately going to fit with the OEM, because we always talk about the tech on the truck, the compute stack, the LiDAR, the radar, the camera, but you also have to have a redundant truck that is set up with that technology to make it work best. So I'm not to judge who will make it to the end. Well, I need to understand who will make it to the end and who will have the best fit, because I don't think ultimately there's going to be one or two companies that survive. I think there's going to be 3, 4, 5 that survive, but we need to understand the best fit for Werner Enterprises in that technology. It's demanding enough on the technology need and the understanding how to operate and the view from the cloud, if you will, that I don't think we're going to find ourselves working with 3 or 4 or 5 companies in autonomy. I think it's going to be just a few in the end. So who are those companies, and who do we, hitch our wagon to?
Well, or your trailer. Yeah. In this case, you mentioned the 2 companies, Chad, that are actually planning to do commercial operation this year. Now, albeit it'll be small, 20 trucks at Aurora. We don't know the exact number of Kodiak, but they also are approaching things a little differently. As you well know, Aurora has signed on with Continental, tier 1 major supplier, to eventually get to line side installation of the Aurora driver. Kodiak is still or is committed to upfits for right now. They don't have that partner for that redundant chassis. But and of course, Aurora does have PACCAR and Volvo as partners. Do you believe that you're going to, I think you just said it, that you're going to have a redundant chassis to really make this work? When you go to order, call it an autonomous system, you're going to want to get that coming out of the factory. You're not going to want it to go to some upfitter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, safety is paramount at Werner today, tomorrow, and into the future. And we won't be participating until we cross that line that we believe safety is solved. And that's a tough one, right? Because when is every case in safety solved? You can't ever replicate every single thing that happens on the roadway or could happen on the roadway in the future. But that's probably the biggest one that keeps me up at night, and our safety team, and just understanding when we can actually make the handshake and say, this unit is safe to operate on the roadway.
But would you be open then, and we'll end it here, would you be open to when, I don't know if you're in line perhaps for Aurora, they're going to put 20 trucks out, they say. Would you be comfortable putting, your trailer on a driverless truck even this year? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I believe they've announced that they're going to do a lot of their own testing early on. Werner will not be participating in a driverless truck with a Werner trailer and freight behind it in 2024. It possibly in 2025. We have to get some reps and miles under it before we would put our trailer without a driver in the vehicle. Today, and just for clarity, you and I think, know this, but every single load that we're testing with them today have both a safety driver and a second seat engineer on board on every mile that they haul down the roadway today. So you've got the autonomous system operating along with a backup driver, along with an engineer sitting in the passenger seat on every single load that we're testing today.
And a pretty flat road out there on I-45, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Down there in Texas. All right. Listen, Chad,
that is something that people don't necessarily understand with autonomous. And, hey, I get the question all the time, well, when's it going to take over trucking? When's that going to be the only thing on the roadway? None of these companies are talking about this light switch moment where every new truck coming on the road is going to be autonomous. Even if that was the case, let's say there was a light switch moment, you take the average age of truck, you take the production of vehicles across the U.S. I mean, if there was a light switch moment, it would take 15 years to replace every truck on the roadway to autonomous. The autonomous companies aren't suggesting that. We aren't suggesting that. We know it's not going to happen that way. So when is autonomy going to be 10 or 20 or 30% of the trucks that operate in the roadway? We're looking past my retirement for those type of numbers.
Okay, well, since I'm semi-retired, it's already past me. Chad, thank you so much. Been great to speak with you and have you on the show today, and I appreciate your insights.
Thank you. You too, Alan.
All right, well, folks, the show this week, a little different. It's always good to get with people like Chad Dittberner who live this stuff every day, and it isn't theory. It is what can we do practically to bring these technologies forward. And obviously there's a little bit of take your time. Don't get in too big a hurry here. So glad you could join us. We'll see you next time.